How's it going, Tamers? Feels like just yesterday when the new Rue Lodge was added to the game. With that update we got Koish, a tem that comes in 12 different flavors. So many colors, so many possibilities. So many wasted hours fishing at the lodge. Anyway, cool concept, I thought. Surely they won't make another tem with this many types and combinations to keep track of. Chromion is like Koish, but instead of a fish, it's a lizard. Instead of part water, it's part digital. And instead of having a multicolor tail, it has some sick LED lights. Aside from the fact that both tems function with the same concept, the two tems are actually pretty different. I'd like to make a video on Koish later, but Chromion's new, so let's talk about him. Chromion can come in any type plus digital. The only thing that changes along with Chromion's secondary type is the addition of 2 new stab techniques. These techniques and type combinations make certain Chromions more viable than others. Chromion's stats and base move pool set him up to be a glass cannon special attacker. He has access to hologram and harmful microwaves, both very fast digital moves. Hologram being a free turn of evasion on very high priority, and microwaves being a reliable stab move when paired with another digital tem. His 2 traits are Synertyper and Pigment Inverter. The most commonly used trait is Synertyper, which gives it a big damage boost if it matches at least one of its types with an ally. Pigment Inverter reverses the weaknesses and resistances of enemy tems that Chromion attacks. This also allows Chromion to be played as a niche counter tem that can surprise and threaten certain tems your team may have trouble with. Which trait is better? Well, it depends on the specific Chromion. Synertyper is usually better because it's a flat 30% damage boost. The rule of thumb for Pigment Inverter is it makes your digital typing weaker and makes your other typing stronger, sometimes. You no longer can take advantage of digital's effectiveness against mental, melee, and other digital tems, but it makes your secondary type unpredictable, allowing for some interesting combinations. Since we've got 24 flavors of Chromion to cover with different strengths and weaknesses, I thought it might be fun and quirky to make a tier list for them. At the top is A tier. These are confirmed to be viable in high elo PvP. They've been seen in tournaments with good success. If you want to play a Chromion, you can't go wrong with the ones in this tier. The next tier are theoretically good and have potential as a core tem on certain teams. The tier below that is niche. They are good as fillers on certain teams that need specific coverage and resistances. Now, this is where I'll be putting most of the Pigment Inverters, since a lot of them have a certain surprise factor that allow them to defeat tems that otherwise have never been threatened. And the bottom is bad. I don't think they're viable in any sense. We're gonna be jumping all over the tier list to try and focus on one type at a time, so check the timestamps. We have a lot to cover in this video, so let's get into it. First off is Neutral Chromion. He's a mix of many good things. Neutral typing provides synergy to some of the strongest moves in the game. Quetzalania, which defined the Kisiwa meta, Sparkling Bullet, and Generify. Generify in particular is making waves in the Sapanku meta. He also provides digital synergy for Harmful Microwaves and Electro Punch, 2 other very fast, very strong moves. Essentially, as far as typing goes, Neutral Digital is just very, very good, especially since it can counter its own weakness to Mental with Digital. If that wasn't enough, Neutral Chromion has access to Undermine. This puts him in a similar tier as Momo. Momo does about 10% more damage with Stab Master and has some good utility moves, but Chromion's dual typing makes it good in its own way. Synertyper Neutral is going in A tier, since they've already been making waves in competitive. Pigment Inverter Neutral, on the other hand, is not good. The Pigment Inverter makes your neutral moves super effective against Mental, but you already had digital moves to cover that before. Let's just not mess with a good thing. Synertyper Wind could have been really good if it learned Tornado, but instead it gets Blizzard. Glass Cannon relying on a low priority move is not a good look. Pigment Inverter Wind Chromion is not much better, for pretty much the same reason as it has to rely on Blizzard for big damage. At least it can be used as a surprise counter to rival Wind Tems, but there are so many good electric types in the meta, I don't know why you would bother. Chromion Earth is the only digital Earth Tem. It's no longer weak to electric, but 4 times weak to water. Its digital typing provides coverage against the melee it's weak against, so it can theoretically stay in against those tems in trade. It has access to Dust Vortex, which as far as special earth moves go, it's pretty good, dropping it into the niche tier. Chromion Earth Pigment Inverter is also just okay. It has a surprise factor that could maybe kill a water Tem with Dust Vortex. It can be a niche counter to Wind Tems, and it threatens Loali and Saku with 4 times super effective damage, something they've never had to worry about before. Chromion Water has overlap with Digital Koish. It has Water Cannon, which is really good, and higher special attack than Koish. It traded in its weakness to water for a 4 times weakness to electric, but at least it's not weak to toxic anymore. Theoretically, if you ran Sinner-Typer Water Chromion and Synergy Master Toxic Koish, you could blow someone up with a huge 55% boosted damage water cannon. Pigment Inverter Water Chromion can surprise counter water, nature, and toxic Tems. Yggdrasil and Calibus get 4 times blasted by water cannon out of nowhere. That's gotta be worth something. Fire Chromion shares typing with Hedgen. Oh hey, I made a video on him too. Go watch it. Or don't. I'm not your dad. Chromion also learns Hellfire. I guess it's a requirement that you're 4 times weak to water to learn Hellfire. Hedgen beats Chromion in speed and base damage, but Chromion's Hellfire has higher damage potential if you use Sinner-Typer. I can imagine a fire-heavy team running Fire Koish, Hedgen, and Fire Chromion, dropping massive synergy Hellfires. Fire Chromion has some decently wide coverage, but the types don't complement each other. Pigment Inverter Fire is in the same spot as the other Pigment Inverters. It does have its niche in being able to one-shot Fire Koish. If you max your speed TVs, you'll outspeed most Koish water cannons because they don't invest too heavily into speed themselves. If you have a team that is very weak to fire, this might be the Tem to fill that spot. Nature Chromion has the best defensive typing. Having Nature as a secondary typing removes your weakness to water and electric, and Digital covers Nature's weakness to Toxic, meaning it's only weak to Fire and Digital. It has access to those sweet Digital moves from before, but also Resin Trap, a high damage trapping move that only Loali had access to in the past. I think this is probably the best Chromion type, just because it functions as an individual Tem. It's a good Nature Digital Tem that does good Nature Digital damage. You don't have to take my word for it, he's been seeing play in competitive. Pigment Inverter Nature is also decent on paper. It has its good defensive typing and it just threatens different types. I could see this being useful on a Salad team. It can provide Nature synergy for Revitalize and also cover against Toxic and Nature Tems you normally couldn't deal with. Electric Chromion has some potential. The electric type itself has the widest coverage of any type. It's super effective against 4 types and resisted by 4 types. It learns Thunder Strike, which is a very good special electric move. The Sinner-Typer version has some good damage potential when paired with an Electro Punch user like Rydnet or Zalbian, providing some much needed synergy. And because the typing coverage is so wide, Pigment Inverter is good as well. I'm putting both of them in B tier, mostly because in theory, if your opponent has an electric Chromion on turn 1, it has 8 potential types for it to be super effective against and resist. You bring Volphy in and it either resists 4 times or dies. Who knows? It's Schrodinger's Temtem. Until it drops its first Thunder Strike, it's simultaneously going to kill your Tem and also not going to hurt it at all. Mental Chromion. I think I have to drop it into F tier. It learns Gamma Burst, which does a ton of damage, but costs so much stamina, and it has a hold. As far as mental moves go, this one is not very great. The coverage from mental and digital overlap, and it's just not very good. Pigment Inverter is even worse, cause you only do super effective damage to Crystal type. You gave up your 4 other coverage moves for 1. Okay, this is the one I'm most excited about. So in this patch, they added the Sensei Robe to the game, which is a piece of gear that increases special melee damage by 25%. Melee Chromion learns Melee Torrent and Inner Spirit. Of all the melee Tems that learn Inner Spirit, Chromion has the highest special attack. As far as special melee moves go, Melee Torrent is actually the 2nd strongest special melee move. So yeah, Sinner-Typer Melee Chromion has some good damage potential. It has great coverage, digital and melee really work well together, and has access to a good move pool. If you live for 1 turn, you can hologram to hopefully live 1 more and drop a giant Inner Spirit. 170 base damage with Stab, Sinner-Typer, and Sensei Robe make it hit like a truck. So yeah, I'm dropping it in the viable spot. Pigment Inverter, on the other hand, is awful. Your melee attacks are super effective against melee and mental, but you already had that with digital. So let's once again not mess with a good thing. Crystal Chromion's typing is Okay, but not the best. Crystal and Digital have a little bit of overlap, but at least it isn't weak to Electric anymore, and it can cover its own melee weakness. It learns Crystal Deluge, which, after one turn of hold, is a very good priority 3 sleep move. I think Mudrid makes use of it better since its base speed is higher, but maybe on a Crystal Deluge focused team, you try and run both. Crystal Chromion pairs well with Mix or Loaddle to activate its Cinetyper and Crystal Deluge synergy at the same time, putting him in niche because he requires a specific partner to function well. Pigment Inverter, on the other hand, is not very good at all. Your crystal techniques are now super effective against fire and earth, which isn't anything new. Water's been doing that for years. Toxic Chromion learns Venom Spread, which requires the target to already be poisoned to deal damage, but Chromion doesn't have a way to poison things itself. Otherwise, on paper, it's got a pretty good type coverage, just only Toxic Torrent to use reliably. Having your other Tem poison and then Venom spreading is pretty good. The Cinetyper would do a ton of damage, but I don't think it works as a standalone Tem. Pigment Inverter Toxic Chromion is, I think, a little bit better. It still has access to Venom Spread, it's just better against different types. And it can use Toxic Torrent to check enemy Toxic Tems. The whole issue with the Venom Spread strategy is it can't deal with Toxic Tems because they can't be poisoned. So yeah, it's a Venom Spreader that can beat Tems that can't be beat by Venom Spreader. I'm gonna put it in B tier. I think it might be good enough to push a Toxic team in the right direction. And last, but unfortunately least, pure Digital Chromion is not very good. I don't know why you would run it. Nature Chromion is just a better version unless you really need a monotype Tem on your team. It kinda defeats the whole purpose of Chromion, right? Pigment Inverter is complete garbage. Nothing resists Digital, so you only invert the good pigments into bad pigments. It's bad, irredeemably bad. Whew, and that's all 24 different Chromions. What do you think of the final tier list? I'm pretty confident with it. Hey, what do I know? If there's one thing I've learned from playing this game, all Tems have the potential to be good. If you like Wind Chromion, maybe you can figure out a way to sweep a tournament with it and prove me wrong. More power to you. Anyway, I hope you like this video, and thanks for watching.